The question of whether a game will see an official Western release has become less common as the gaming market has grown, yet some titles still slip through the cracks, much to the frustration of dedicated fans. One such game is the feel-good developed Otogi Katsugeki Mamada no Bakeru, Oracle Saitaru no Sainan, and I really hope that I pronounced that right. Anyway, initially released in Japan in November 2023, there was no certainty that this 3D platformer, often seen as a spiritual successor to Konami's Goemon series, would ever reach English-speaking audiences. So it was quite a surprise when Site Chunsoft suddenly announced the localization, complete with a close release date and a PC port. Having played Goemon around 15 years ago, I remembered almost nothing about it. As a result, I had no expectations for this vibrant adventure, now known simply as Bakeru in the West. These lack of preconceptions led to a genuine delightful surprise, as Bakeru is undoubtedly one of the best 3D platformers in recent memory. Bakeru follows a titular protagonist as he's tasked with freeing Japan from Oracle Saitoro's rule. This premise serves as a backbone of the narrative and doesn't expand much beyond that and their straightforward goal. At first, Bakeru travels across the country, unwittingly acquiring essential items known as the henge licenses from various heroes in this fairy tale depiction of Japan. The journey then escalates as he gains access to an airship and must save certain individuals who can ultimately thwart Oracle Saitoro's schemes. Bakeru is a somewhat reluctant hero, essentially forced into this role, but he goes along with it without much complaint. He's likable enough, though his personality isn't particularly strong. The heroes and allies he encounters are fairly one-note in their traits and intentions, so there's not much depth to explore on that front. Still, they serve their purpose in pushing the plot forward, which isn't the main draw of this game anyway. The core of Bakeru is the methodical combat-oriented 3D platforming. The structure is familiar. Players navigate stages filled with collectibles, enemies, and various obstacles. The stages are usually vast, with plenty of vertical and optional pathways, offering plenty of secrets to discover. Despite the length of the stages, progression always feels fulfilling and addictive. This is the most fun I've had with a 3D platformer in years. The variety of environments keeps the experience fresh and memorable. Bakeru is agile, with standard jumps and side hop reminiscent of Mario's Sunshine. The gameplay feels intuitive and satisfying, particularly in the later stages when challenges become more demanding. Where Bakeru differs from other platformers is in the combat focus. You have two drumsticks, controlled with L and R, and hitting them in rhythm creates a combo that deals swift damage. While this is mostly useful against bosses or large foes, it enhances the pacing. The combat actually never overshadows the platforming because enemies are both frail and threatening due to their large numbers. Consider them more like obstacles that slow progression for a minute or two at most. The crowds of enemies may seem like an issue, but they're not that irritating. As you progress, Bakeru automatically learns new combat techniques for dealing with multiple enemies, such as a shockwave that affects a large area. Additionally, Bakeru can transform into heroes using the henge licenses that he's acquired. These transformations are brief and combat-focused, adding variety without overwhelming the gameplay. The combat and platforming work together seamlessly, which is impressive considering how often combat in platformers can feel forced. However, one of my minor complaints is how you learn new moves without any narrative or environmental context. You're simply informed of them them, and then you move on. It's not a major issue, but it's worth noting. Another critique is the lack of necessity for the hinged licenses. While the first transformation, which makes Bakeru small for select pathways, is used sparingly, the others that focus solely on combat feel less essential. I would have preferred more puzzles or combat challenges that required specific transformations. However, I appreciate that Bakeru doesn't rely too heavily on this gimmick, as the default combat and progression are strong enough on their own. Boss battles in Bakeru are exceptionally well designed. While they lack difficulty, they require attention to movesets and careful reactions. These battles, along with occasional kaiju-sized boss battles, add a nice change of pace. There are also mini-games where Bakeru rides a robotic dog, which helps break up the platforming and keeps the gameplay loop fresh. The game's collectibles add another layer of enjoyment. Almost every stage has 5 pieces of trivia and 3 souvenirs to collect. These are pretty easy to miss, but feel rewarding if you find the time to explore. Further, the trivia provides interesting tidbits about Japanese mythology and lore, while the souvenirs offer a sense of accomplishment. However, the Tanuki collectibles, which only become available midway through the game, can feel like a chore to find, especially if you're replaying stages just to collect them. In terms of performance, Bakeru was generally stable, though there were some frame rate drops in the crowded scenarios. These don't impact the gameplay experience, but if you're sensitive to frame rate issues, the PC version might be the better option here. 3D platformers have been thriving in recent years, but Bakeru stands out as a notable success. While it could have been made better use of the combat ideas, the overall execution is brilliant, making it a must-play for fans of the genre. The varied stage design and addictive battles make every moment of progression feel significant. Whether you're a die-hard fan of 3D platformers or just looking for a new adventure, Bakeru deserves a spot on your gaming list. Noisy Pixel is giving Bakeru a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.